welcome to the Leading with Lean podcast. My name's Philip Holt, author of Leading with Lean, The Simplicity of Lean, and Leading Lean by Living Lean. And in this podcast, I narrate all three of my books, chapter by chapter, in which I share with you my over 30 years of experience as a lean leader across many companies globally. Leading with Lean, Chapter 6, Hoshin Kanri. The need for Hoshin Kanri. Hoshin Kanri, or policy deployment, is an approach known by most people, and quite a few organisations use it in one form or another. However, despite this, the statistics in terms of the need for a more effective execution of strategy are clear. Less than 15% of companies routinely track how they perform over how they thought they were going to perform. 95% of employees don't understand their company strategy. Less than 27% of employees have access to their company strategic plan. 86% of executive teams spend less than 1 hour a month reviewing strategy, and 90% of companies fail to execute their strategies successfully. There are a few large organisations for whom Hoshin Kanri is a clear and integral part of how they consistently deliver breakthrough performance in the execution of their strategy. However, I've also seen a number of smaller organisations prospering with this approach, and the clarity that it brings for the team members is great to see. Most importantly, it significantly reduces overburdening and feeling of a lack of direction amongst many employees, and deals with the root cause of a significant part of the waste that we find in an organisation, the overburden of initiatives. Eric Abrahamson, in his book Change Without Pain, describes the significant impact of initiative overload on organisations and their people, looking at the vast number of academic studies in the field, including over 5,000 on employee overwork and burnout. Its central argument is that firms can achieve superior long-term and short-term performance by reducing the amount of highly disruptive change. My belief is that Hoshin Kanri is the way in which this can be strategically managed. The leadership problem. Given that less than 15% of companies track performance against plan, meaning that over 85% of companies will not realise how badly they are executing their strategies, it is hardly surprising that 90% of companies fail to execute their strategies successfully. Furthermore, as around 86% of executive teams spend less than 1 hour a month reviewing strategy, they would appear to be more involved in the day-to-day problems of the business than they are in steering the future direction. Given this, it's hardly surprising that the leaders of most organisations don't take the time to implement a methodology that would ensure excellence in the execution of their strategy. It should therefore be clear that, if we are to successfully transform our business using a lean approach, the lean leader must ensure that Hoshin Kanri is embedded into the leadership's way of working. It shouldn't be a surprise by now that this will include not only implementing the tool, but also establishing a commitment from the leadership to rebalance their time allocation away from daily firefighting towards strategy execution. Fortunately, the deployment of lean thinking will enable our people to solve problems in a structured way and will reduce the expectation that leaders should solve all of the problems. For the lean leader, this will be another moment to engage the leadership in the music that they are playing, demonstrating the beauty of the new approach and the benefits that it will bring to them, their people and the business. The secret ingredient of business success. Hoshin Kanri is what I call the secret ingredient of business success, as it is found in some form or another in all of the most successful businesses, probably most famously at Danaher, for the way in which they have used it to grow the business at an average of around 20% year on year for over 20 years. It is a structured methodology for the translation of strategy into execution, and Hoshin Kanri, like many of the lean management methodologies, is a Japanese term, which simply translated means direction needle and control logic. Hoshin Kanri is therefore a methodology for the logical management of the execution of their organisational strategic direction. Hoshin Kanri follows the PDCA cycle in its approach with an annual rhythm and typically a 3 to 5 year time horizon. In the planning phase, the major differences between Hoshin Kanri and a typical approach to the deployment of strategy are twofold. 1. Decisions are actively made on what to do, but most importantly, which of the many opportunities the organisation will not take up. Companies that adopt Hoshin Kanri accept that having too many priorities is the equivalent of having no priorities. Some opportunities will have to be sacrificed, not because they are not good initiatives, but because their organisation simply doesn't have the resources to pursue them. Other things are more important and focus is required to do them well. Secondly, the answer to how the strategy will be delivered is delegated to the appropriate level of the organisation through a process called catchball, meaning that those people who will need to deliver are also empowered to determine the best way to deliver. They also get to provide input on item 1 to ensure that the decision made on the priorities is the correct one. As you may have gleaned from this, the planning phase typically takes longer than it would in a traditional approach and is very thorough and inclusive, with a strategy creation and targets initially set at the top level of the organisation, but a great deal of the how to achieve determined at the most appropriate level of the organisation through an iterative approach. However, what this thorough planning allows is a rigorous discipline of execution once the organisation moves into the do, check and act phases of the cycle. It is typical that this planning will take place during the third and fourth quarters of the organisation's financial year to ensure that the plans are ready for execution on day one of the new financial year. What is important to note here is that this is an ongoing cycle rather than distinct planning per year, and therefore the annual plan is simply the continuation of the longer term strategic plan. The plans are, of course, linked to the annual budget or annual operating plan of the organisation, and it should be clear how the initiatives that are chosen will contribute to the business performance improvements, of which there will be two contributing components. Hoshin Kanri activities being the first, and secondly, continuous improvement, stroke Kaizen. In the book, you will see a graph which shows years 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4 on the x-axis and performance from 0 to 100% on the y-axis. And this is a relative or an indicative graph. And what it shows is a baseline in year 0, which in year 1 increases by the Kaizen activity and the Hoshin Kanri activity. Year 2 then shows that the baseline is now what year 1 completed at, and then there's further Kaizen and Hoshin Kanri taking it to a new baseline for year 3 and so on. The idea is that at year 4 in this particular example, the strategic objectives have been achieved fully. Throughout the annual cycle, the daily execution of the plans will be managed by the owner and their execution team, whilst the next level leadership team will review on a regular basis, typically monthly. Depending on the number of levels in the organisation, these reviews will roll up to the top of the organisation. However, the level of detail will decline as the reviews move upward. This PDCA cycle runs continuously and ensures that there is a support for the initiative teams where it is required and that execution is effective. Where changes in the business environment occur, changes to priorities can be made, but only within the Hoshin Kanri review structure, to ensure that changes are made for good reasons only and not because of a whim or a fancy. The important thing about the process is that it recognises that there will always be more good ideas than resources, and therefore the prioritisation and focus on choices is paramount to a successful execution. Hi, Philip here. Sorry to interrupt the narration of this particular chapter, but I just wanted to remind you that all of my personal profits from the books go to charity. So if you would like to buy a book, it would really be helpful. Otherwise, if you feel that the podcast is sufficient, then please feel free to make a donation to my current charity, which is Women's Aid. It's a great charity which helps to stop domestic violence for women and children. Thank you. The X Matrix. As the Hoshin Kanri approach is rolled out across the organisation, it is important that a standardised approach is used to deploy the methodology, as it will cascade from the top level of leadership through the different levels of the business, and so a standard approach is essential to ensuring that the content that is discussed and not the format. And in the book you will see a picture of a typical Hoshin Kanri X Matrix. Whilst there are a number of formats available, one of the most popular is the X Matrix, which brings with it a certain elegance in terms of its readability. The beauty of the format is that the strategic objectives for the next 3 to 5 years, the annual objectives for the current planning year, the initiatives to deliver the annual objectives, and the KPIs, sometimes called targets to improve, TTIs, may be viewed on one piece of paper or one PowerPoint slide. Behind this will be an A3 problem-solving document for each of the initiatives, detailing the problem statement, target condition, root causes, and the countermeasures to reach the target condition. From each of these A3s, the implementation plan is made and can be used to allocate the tasks to the different parts of the organisation, ensure that the resources are in place. The X matrix facilitates the cascading of initiatives from the top level of the organisation to the subsequent levels, whereby an initiative will become an annual objective for the next level, which will then have sub-initiatives that are appropriate for its level. Depending upon the size of the organisation, the cascade could go for 3 to 4 levels. To give an example of this, assume that one of the strategic objectives of a company was to grow its revenue by 50% over the next 5 years, whilst maintaining its EBITDA. The annual objective for the financial year might be to increase revenue by 15%, which might translate into one initiative related to expanding sales into the North American market. This initiative could then be cascaded into the North American sales organisation, who would make this one of their annual objectives. They would decide how to do this through the catchpole process explained earlier, ensuring that they had sufficient resources and capabilities in place to do this, and completing the A3 and implementation plan. This was one simple example, but it obviously becomes more complex as we look at the multiple initiatives that are normally prevalent in an organisation. Nevertheless, this is another of the advantages of the X matrix, as it makes this problem visible quite quickly and facilitates the tough discussions and difficult decisions necessary to just focus on those initiatives, the ones that only will deliver truly on our strategic objectives with the resources and capabilities that we have. Where we don't have sufficient resources or capability to achieve them, this will also be exposed, and decisions can be made about either scaling back ambitions or putting in place a realistic plan to increase our capacity to deliver on them. Ritual planning. As discussed earlier in the chapter, leaders must invest sufficiently in the development and execution of strategy if it is to be successful. They must plan the allocation of their time to do this and ensure rigour and discipline in adherence. The best way to do this is through a technique called leader standard work, one of the fundamentals of lean thinking. A significant part of this is simply planning your time accordingly, and a previous manager of mine coined the term ritual planning to describe the essence of what this is. One of the biggest challenges for a manager, and something that the lean leader must support, is to let go of the daily firefighting that they will inevitably be involved in. This is difficult to give up on, as it is addictive, and despite what many managers will tell you, I observe a willing participation by most, which in my opinion is due to the feeling of achievement that gives them in the short term. Managers must be weaned off the firefighting drug and the intravenous email that enables, if the lean leader is to achieve the focus that is needed to make Hoshin Kanri and hence strategy execution work. The lean leader therefore needs to invest significant time in teaching and coaching the leadership in setting up their ritual planning and ultimately their leader standard work. Given that around 86% of executive leadership teams spend less than 1 hour per month on reviewing their strategy, and that the ideal is more like 107 hours, which is around 70% of their time, the gap between current state and future state is usually massive. Even at the mid-managerial level, we would expect around 60 hours per month of their time to be dedicated to breakthrough activity, and it would thus be disingenuous of me to suggest that you ought to ask your leadership to make such an immediate leap. Realistically, the other elements of the lean transformation, enabling daily management, problem solving and a Kaizen culture to permeate the workforce, are required before the leadership can fully eradicate their indulgence in firefighting. So we need to start with a realistic commitment. What you'll now see in the book is a graph that shows on the x-axis proportion of time spent and on the y-axis 4 levels of hierarchy: team member, team/group leader, middle management and top management. And what it shows is that the proportion of time spent on daily management reduces as we go up the hierarchy, but the amount of time spent on breakthrough activity increases. And that's how it should be in an ideal situation. But of course, as I've just mentioned, we will have to take some time to transition in an organisation. An approach that I've used effectively is to agree with the leadership team to initially commit to allocating a weekly time in the following ratios: daily management, 50% or 20 hours per week; strategy and Hoshin Kanri, 20% or 8 hours per week; people development, 10% or 4 hours per week; and flex time 20% or 8 hours per week. This time is then planned in their calendar with as much coordination of the daily management and strategy time as possible to ensure that collaboration is possible amongst team members. The people development time is the structured time that they will spend on one-to-one performance and development reviews with their team members, remembering that people development and coaching is an ongoing exercise and should also happen informally during all of the other activities. Flex time is an important element of this planning. Just as we would not plan to run a machine 100% of the time, we should not plan our people's calendars to tie up 100% of their time. We therefore need to provide them with some overflow time in case of additional problem-solving requirements from one of the other 3 categories, or simply for some hindsight time to reflect upon things and make decisions in a positive manner. What this means in terms of a day in the life of the leader is that they'll spend time at the Gemba to undertake daily management for around 4 hours per day, attending communication cell or ComTel meetings, supporting problem solving and being involved in Kaizen activity. They will also likely have 1 or 2 half-hour development meetings with their people and spend around 1 to 2 hours working on strategy or Hoshin activities. In their flex time of 1 to 2 hours, they will catch up on any of the problem solving that came out of the earlier elements. By helping the leadership to work in a more structured manner, focusing on increasing their time spent on the breakthrough activities, the lean leader will take a great stride toward effective Hoshin Kanri, embedding lean thinking into the organisation and creating an enabler of the other elements of the lean transformation.